Hello, I'm Gregory C. Hood Jr. Um, Psychology 482 with Dr. Dupre, XP1 Spring 2023. And this is my presentation on ways to engage in ongoing personal and professional self-evaluation. First off, with professional self-evaluation, we learn that it allows a person to reflect on his or her accomplishments. The person is able to look at things internally. And in the reading I did by in this journal by Dash and Mohanty in 2019, they cited Rotter, who's an academic, and his concept of locus of control. And with locus control is you get rewarded from the things that you do. Fate is not a thing. Rewards come from actions. So when you are looking inside at the job you're doing professionally, your proficiencies, your accommodations are because of the work you did. Your deficiencies are also a result of the things you can control. It is important for your self-evaluation to be positive, and that is because it is the most important evaluation that you can do. You get evaluated by your supervisor every year, but how do you see yourself? What do you think of the job you're doing? A self-evaluation carries the most weight. It is rooted in the confidence you have in the work that you do. Regardless of what kind of work you do, it would behoove that workplace to provide their employees the chance to do self-evaluations. One of the things you'll see, if you haven't already been in university, this is a senior level course, so hopefully you've already acknowledged that the university is a diverse environment. And as such, so will the workplace be. And you're going to have staff members that didn't have the benefit of a university experience. And this will be their first exposure to people that don't look like them, don't have the same cultural history, they don't have the same experiences. And part of professional evaluation is acknowledging your proficiency and deficiencies in how other cultures exist, live, and practice. Your self-evaluation is an exploration into inherent bias that you may have developed. You know, you grew up in a bubble and you didn't see a lot of people that differed from your experiences. So by looking inside, it's a safe space to explore your privilege. We all have a privilege one way or the other. This allows you to evaluate it and look at it. See what you have in common with, your coworker or your classmate that's different from you. You have things in common, you have things that are different, evaluate them, think about them. And over time, you will develop cultural competence. So we look at three things when we're talking about cultural competency: self-awareness, education, and interaction. And with self-awareness, explore your own culture, be aware. What do you believe? What did you grow up around? And stimulate some positive comparisons and differences between you and other cultures. Go through explorations of bias unintentionally generated by your culture. We all have specific advantages and disadvantages through our lives. And by being self-aware of yours, and hopefully your colleague will be aware of theirs, you will have self-awareness. And that goes toward building cultural competence in the workplace. Education. Found a great program called SOAP. The Self and Other Awareness Project is what that acronym stands for. And it's credible, researched methods to guide each individual person into self-evaluation. And it encourages hands-on interactions. And they are credentialed, certified experts in diversity that can come to a workplace and teach your people about self-evaluation and how that relates to diversity. And they don't even have to come physically. They can zoom in like we're doing with this project here. But they help to acknowledge our shortcomings, and our colleagues will be able to acknowledge theirs and build that bridge. And you'll learn that interaction is so important. It is not a derogatory statement to say that society is white dominated. You look at any credible research and we see that's the case. So what do we learn from that? We need to interact with people that are different from us, and they need to interact with us. This mutual interaction, it's bilateral. We equally learn from each other. And when we interact, we need to equally share. And it's a hands-on education. We don't need a room full of 5 white people talking about the experiences of non-white people. We need non-white people in that room sharing their experience with us so we can be culturally competent. And if we self-reflect on where we are short in our competence, these methods will help us to be a better colleague and or classmate as it is. And so then we're going to look at some personal self-reflections in this younger version of me in this photo. And Zell, Strickhauser, Sadekis, and Alec in 2020, this team of 4 people, they did a study and they found that the average person believes that they're better than average. And their research was on measurable objective things. And a person is inclined to embrace outside critique when it's positive, and they'll reject negative. You have a business and somebody leaves a negative Yelp review, you're probably going to be dismissive of it, type up a little defense of it. But if they leave a positive review, you're going to share it on your business's Facebook page. So with the better than average effect, and a person believes that they're better than the average bear, a person can evaluate themselves in a positive manner without encroaching upon conceit. And from this, we learn a person will generally look at their coworkers as their basis for their evaluation. And more times than not, they found during this research that they're going to look at the more proficient employees as their basis for comparison. So here's your self-evaluation. Well, I'm going to look at the person that got Employee of the Year and compare off of that. And the point of all this was to explore the focus of an individual's bias. And they had 4 approaches that they did in their study. They had the direct method, the indirect method, the forced choice method, and the percentile method. So, direct method, they used numbers to quantify the results. It was a scale of 1 to 7, 4 being the middle point. And you'd use an odd number because you have that definable middle point. And 7 is just this standard scale that's used in the research that they found. And when you give someone a self-evaluation to see how they view themselves in comparison to the average person, they will usually 4 is that average person. That's your point of reference. Most people will go 5 or higher. The indirect method also uses numbers because academics love numbers. And in this case, it's 2 numbered scales, both 1 to 7. First scale is for the person being studied, 1 to 7. How do you rank yourself? Second scale, also 1 through 7. How would you rank a hypothetical person that does your job? And it allowed the researchers to take the scale the person did on himself and the scales the people did on hypothetical others, have 2 different scores. And they found a bulk of the studied participants, they ranked themselves better than average when compared to a hypothetical other person that would be doing their job. Now, in the forced choice method, we're looking at an either or situation. There's no number scale. It's just positive or negative. Are you better than average or are you less than average on punctuality, on timeliness, on all these different factors that you would be ranked on? And again, more people picked better than average. The last one would be percentile method. Percent, you think of 100, and the method uses numbers. Participants pick on a scale of 1 to 100, evaluate your traits and relations to others. And across multiple categories, people picked 51 or higher, 50 being the average. People were still picking better than the average in the percentile method. And what do we find from BTAE, as it's called in their abbreviation? Well, if you believe that you're better than average, you probably have a healthy mental status. And the research also finds that believing that you're better than average is healthy and beneficial for your psyche. So let's talk about who was studied in the 2020 research. And they studied binary genders uh, consistently between men and women, the distribution of more men, more women picked better than average scores. So there was no deviation. Men were just as likely as women to say they were better than average. Culturally, they did sample more Western people than Eastern people, but even then, no deviations. The Westerners, most of them picked better than average. The Easterners, better than average. In fact, the only real deviations observed were when looking at age. Now, they covered ages 5 to 70, and they found that younger people had higher rates of rating themselves better than average than the older people. And they closed it with talking about race. There was no real deviations on race. All the ethnic groups showed a tendency to rank themselves better than average. So far, we've covered university and professional settings are more culturally diverse than our high school and hometown experiences. A part of self-evaluation in both personal and professional contexts is you have to acknowledge cultural differences. Studies will indicate that the average person will think of himself or herself as better than average. And we set aside outliers with inflated senses of self. And with that set aside, we find that having an attitude that you're better than average is a sign of a healthy mind. So why do we bother with self-evaluation? Well, it gives us a chance to look inside. And when you utilize it at work, you can identify where you're good, where you need improvement. You can show your supervisor that, hey, I know that I do this good. I need to improve on this. If you're the supervisor, it allows your subordinates to say, hey, I know I'm working on this and I'm going to do better. And also I'm doing well at this. If your notes match, it shows that your subordinate is in a good place. They can fairly evaluate themselves. Or if you're the person doing the self-evaluation, you can evaluate yourself well. And if your notes don't match, you evaluated yourself better than your supervisor did, no problem. It's a chance to communicate expectations. What do you expect of this job? What does the supervisor expect of you? It's not a bad thing to have differences in opinion on something new. And we're going to go into that some more. Let's look at it in a positive lens. So when you're doing your self-evaluation, write down all your accomplishments. Professionally boast, write down everything that you did that was good. Don't fluff it up, but talk about your good things. Acknowledge your shortcomings, but don't make them all you focus on. Those shortcomings, those deficiencies, that's a starting point for a new thing to overcome. Keep a list of your milestones, your new challenges. Hey, in 2022, you were having trouble doing this. In 2023, you're kicking it. Well, guess what? Write that down. So when 2024 rolls around, you have a pattern of improvement for your self-evaluations. And remember, you get a negative evaluation. It's not ideal. It's not the end of the world. They're not terminal. And whatever the regularity is on your evaluation, you have a chance on your next one to do better. Never look at a bad evaluation as defeat. Look at it as an opportunity to grow. And as you grow, you can write it down. And if your supervisor overlooks your growth or overlooks an accomplishment that you had, you have it written down and saying, hey, by the way, you missed this. I did this task. I got this award. I did this project. Let them know. Personal self-evaluations are important because if you're taking this class, you're probably going into a counseling or counseling adjacent job. And these jobs will have real stressors with real stakes and real people. And you're going to find that your professional stressors will be hard to leave at work. And you're going to learn really fast, if you haven't already, that your stressors at home are going to follow you to work and they're going to overlap. So we have this young man here. He's at work with his little headset on, and in the back of his mind, him and his wife had an argument last night, and he's just thinking about it. But hey, he's smiling because he's at work and he's got to leave the home stress at home. But guess what? It's still there. And your responsibilities will overlap. You're a working professional. You have a home life. It's normal to go to work with stress at home. You're going to have a client. He's going to be, he or she's going to be telling you about their stuff. You're going to be thinking about stuff at home. It's normal. When you go home, you're going to be thinking about a stressful session you had. Normal. But you got to be have awareness. Have frequent self-evaluations. So important. You're going into the counseling field, so you should know the symptoms of burnout and fatigue. And you should practice the same care that you're encouraging your clients to do. There are big picture implications here. If you're unable to help, then you're not able to help your client. And that's an appointment that they have with you that they can't get because you didn't take care of yourself. And Barnett and Hominy, some researchers I found from a 2022 journal, they even went as far as to say, if you're neglecting your own well-being, you're acting unethically. And think back to your ethics course. I know you took it. Think about how important ethics are. So if your own self-care is not a priority and that's unethical, you don't want to be an unethical practitioner. And yeah, it may sound like a cliche, but self-care is not a cliche. If you're not helping yourself, you cannot help others. Self-care is not a joke and it is not selfish. Whether it's your work life, your home life, regardless, if it's burning you out, you need to acknowledge it, recognize it, and act. Whatever method of self-care you have, you do it. It does not matter what your biases are, what your stresses are, what you're good at, what you're deficient at. Knowing it is important. Identifying your shortcomings is what matters so that you can improve. And if you are burning out or you are stressed out, initiate self-care, initiate self-improvement, reach out to a colleague, reach out to a provider, reach out to a classmate, a professor. We have a great team here at Nichols, and we got some great classmates too. They will all be happy to help you if you're burning out. Keep in touch. If you ever need anything, reach out to our faculty, reach out to some of the classmates you and relationships you built. Nothing wrong with it. Constantly to keep track of how you're feeling and what you're feeling. Here's my references. Thank you for tuning in. And seriously, take care of yourself.